Is church marketing biblical? We're talking about that today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I am joined by my friend and co-host AJ Matthew, and today we're joined by special guest Ryan Wakefield, the founder, director, I'm not sure what title you'd love to use, of Church Marketing University. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
And great to be here. Great to hang out with you guys, talk about this topic about is church marketing biblical? And we talk about this. I know you guys probably run into this all the time, pastors that's a very real question that, we need to get into. We need to walk through it. We need to come up with what does the Bible have to say? So really excited about this topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. For our audience that maybe doesn't know what Church Marketing University is, do you mind to share just the elevator pitch, so to speak, for what is it that Church Marketing University is and what it does and how it serves churches?
Yeah, so here it is in 10 seconds. Church Marketing University helps churches get more visitors every single week. So if you want more visitors, we would love to help you do just that. How do we do that? We do that through our online courses, kits, and conferences. And our goal is to get your church to where you're seeing new people digitally and in person visiting your church every single week.
Is church marketing biblical? I think that this question is a legitimate one. I think that people come into, when they hear things like church online or hybrid church or this kind of stuff, a lot of pastors, especially ones who have been in the ministry for 2 decades or 3 decades, it just starts to build some anxiety in them, maybe partially around the technology side, going, I'm not sure if I'm up to the task, but also the rationalization behind it. Like, is this even a good thing for us to do? And so I want to start there with this fundamental question, Ryan, of if we're as a church doing marketing, are we being worldly in this? Is this a worldly thing for us to do? And if so, shouldn't we be avoiding this?
And I would say it probably starts with your definition of marketing, because when we say the word marketing, I think a lot of different ideas pop in people's heads, especially pastors. So if by marketing, we are meaning manipulation, tricks, tactics, slimy business practices, then absolutely not. The church, that would be like the last thing that we would want to do. So I definitely get it. If your experience with the word marketing just screams everything about tricking people or manipulating people, then I would totally understand why you would say, nope, that is not biblical. And I think everybody on this podcast would agree with you. Yep, you're absolutely right. Now, if you have a different perspective of marketing
what would be a better definition?
Yeah, a better definition. Well, marketing is our middle name, so we better have a better definition. We look at it as marketing as simply tools to help you start new relationships. Tools to help you start new relationships. So if we're not talking about manipulation, we're not talking about slimy business practices, we're talking about, should the church be using tools to help us start new relationships? Then I think, yes, absolutely. Especially, I think, hopefully everybody on this podcast could agree, we want to share the good news with as many people as possible, and ultimately see as many people being discipled as possible. And then the ultimate goal is to make heaven more crowded, get as many people experiencing God's kingdom both now and in the future as possible. Then our thought is this, is like, if that's our goal, then can we and should we use every tool at our disposal to do that? Then I think, yes, absolutely. Especially if we can avoid, not the manipulation side, but just the tool side, then I think, yes, we should be using every tool possible to share the good news with as many people as possible and to make as many disciples as possible. Then I'm all in on whatever tool we have available. Let's use it for God's kingdom.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, so it's an interesting point you're bringing up, in that we need to use the tools that we have for the purposes of the Great Commission. And I think that there are probably some tools that we wouldn't even think twice about, but I'm not sure that we even think of them as marketing. So what do you think are some marketing tools that every church, even ones that maybe don't even have any sort of social media presence or anything like that, but what are some marketing tools that most churches use that they don't even realize that it is a marketing tool?
Yeah, and I
hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, here's the breaking news, especially for even a pastor that says, "Hey, I'm 100% against marketing." Guess what? You're marketing, whether you know it or not. So, like, do you have a sign on your church's facility? Okay, like if you're really against marketing, should we take down the sign, right? Like, do you have a website? Is that okay? Can we use that tool? So have you ever been listed in the phone book? Even, do we have phone books still? Like, is that still a thing? But like,
you know what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ryan, actually, I've been in ministry long enough, and I'm sure you have been too. I can remember the days actually where some churches were asking the question, should we even have a website? Do you remember those days? Yeah. In the earlier 2000s, there were questions like, I don't even know, how much should we put into a website, or spending money on a website? Like they maybe had like a GeoCities type thing, right? But like,
well, even the question, the yellow pages, or Shepherd's Guide, it's okay if you advertise in the Shepherd's Guide, that's Christian, but the regular yellow pages, we can't be putting our money there. So yeah, do we want our free listing, or do we want to upgrade to a display ad? So
right. And now people don't even bat an eye at a website, but it's worth remembering that it wasn't that long ago where people were even having a debate about something as simple as a website.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And even if you go back multiple decades, I grew up in a Pentecostal church in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. So that's my upbringing. But I remember hearing stories of the start of that church and the legendary pastors and the kind of the founders of faith that were in that church. And it was so fun to hear what they did to get the good news out, to invite people to church. I mean, they were kind of known in the community for setting attendance records. And it was such this cool, vibrant church of going and being in the community, but inviting people to come to the church as well, come and see. And I remember I think it was the founding pastor, just stories of like, he rented a plane once. Well, he took out a full page ad in the local newspaper and said that there was going to be UFOs appear over the town at this time in this place. And so like everybody's like UFOs. And so which again, marketing, right? Like, and then he rented a plane and with a pilot, and they threw out saucers with invitations to the church at that time. And so it was like this, like, so you would hear these legendary stories of, what the church would do to invite people or to share the good news. And so like, sometimes it's just, there's new things, right? Like we have things like YouTube, and that sounds maybe intimidating, a little bit scary. And should we be doing that? But they're just new ways to get the good news out. And when we really feel like when we talk about going into all the world, we need to be going into the Facebook, which if you look at it is larger than any, I think, country in the entire world, or go into YouTube, go into the web space, or whatever it is. So like when we say go into all the world, we look at like that world includes every channel of communication that we have available to be there, to preach the good news and invite people to come experience discipleship in the context of a local church.
Yeah, so many of our churches have maybe still have a cultural Christianity mindset, and so they really are come and see oriented versus go and tell oriented. And I think it's a byproduct of an assumption that most people know who Jesus is, most people know what the gospel is, and so we don't really need to be going and telling when we're talking about our city and our neighborhood or our country, because this is a Christian country. But that's just not true anymore. Unfortunately, sadly, the data does not back that up. And so we've got to start thinking about this country as a mission field.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. We got to start thinking more like missionaries. And I think if you rewound, decades, if you are living in a Christian culture and community, then maybe it's more like not necessarily what church, like, am I going to go to church, but what church am I going to go to? And so pastors could simply say, hey, all I'm going to do is is I'm going to get up in the pulpit and I'm going to preach the gospel, because naturally, if anybody moves into our community, they're going to come to a church. Well, it's not like that anymore. And kind of in our society, people aren't going to go to church just by default anymore. And so if we're just going to assume all I need to do is get up on Sunday morning at my facility behind my pulpit and preach the good news, and I've done my job, I think we're missing the biggest opportunity to be missionaries to our community when people aren't coming to our facilities just by default anymore.
Right. Yeah. That hasn't happened for a couple of decades now or more.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah. And I think also churches, if they are getting into marketing and have been, most of their effort is in just waving the flag, hey, we're here. And instead of targeting that to, hey, we can help you, we can meet your needs, we can answer your questions. And there's a big difference in that. You're going to get very different responses to those different levels of marketing.
Yeah. And I hope pastors picked up on that idea that we define it tools to help you develop relationships.
Yeah.
And so there is a level of marketing where you are kind of saying, hey, we are here, you're putting up a billboard. But I think way more important to that is, how do you develop relationships where you get to know people in your community? You get to see where they're coming from, what their starting point is, the questions that they're asking, and then you get to point them to how Jesus and God's kingdom is the ultimate answer and fulfillment of whatever question or whatever obstacle that they're coming at in life. And so that relationship always has to be the focus. How do we develop that relationship? Ministry flows out of relationships. That relationships take time. And ultimately, that relationship gives us the discipleship opportunity that we know is the biblical reason why we are here on this planet. And so, and Scott, I think you had some good questions about even the idea of being present to answer people's questions where they are asking those questions.
Yeah, I was actually you're repping a for those of you who are watching the video version of the podcast, Ryan's repping a Texan church shirt today. One of the things that we talked about,
Texan, not Texan church,
not Texan church,
text in church. Yeah.
Text in church. We actually talked about this back in episode, I believe it was 102. But we referenced this book, Boomerang by Tyler Smith. One of the things that we an idea that we latched onto and kind of turned it into a podcast episode with his permission, was this 5D framework, thinking about divorce, death in the family, displacement, disaster, or development, and those being pain points or opportunities, a way of thinking through how people are asking questions. And it's a great place to start. So, I mean, you could go to episode malforsgroup.com/102 and read that article. But generally, people if they're going to make some sort of a move, Ryan, I think, to a church or to ask questions about spiritual things, there's probably some motivating factor, some crisis. And when they have that moment, that question, they're not going to go find a pastor. They're going to ask Pastor Google or Pastor YouTube or Pastor Facebook. And if your church isn't answering questions in the places where the questions are being asked, you're starting from behind.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, very much so. I saw this in a very real way when for a long time, I helped a local pregnancy center in Springfield, Missouri. And this was always like a little bit of a struggles, like how much should we be marketing as a nonprofit designed to help teenagers facing an unplanned pregnancy? And here's what we knew was true is, like, when they hit that moment where they were facing that, they would go to Google and start asking those questions. And then as someone in an organization that wanted to be there to serve that group, are we going to say, man, we need to be there when they're asking those questions? Is there an abortion clinic in Springfield, Missouri? We can either say, hey, we're going to hide our head in the sands and not talk about that. Or we can say, we need to be there so they understand what options are available for helping them in the situation that they find themselves in. And Scott, you're absolutely right. Nowadays, our culture, their first place isn't, I'm going to go talk to my pastor. It's, I'm going to go look it up on YouTube. I'm going to go look it up on Google. And if the church is not there, we are missing out on our opportunity to influence them towards the answers that we know are a part of God's kingdom and the Bible. And so we got to keep coming back to, if they're not in our church every single week and we want to help them, where are we going to be able to help them? And if we just say, hey, to get help, you got to be here on Sunday morning, man, I feel like the church is going to keep losing more and more and more influence if we go down that route. And I don't think any of us want to, just allow our communities and allow the light of the gospel to lose its influence in our community. So I think it's time that we, keep shining the light everywhere we possibly can with every tool that we possibly can. And hopefully that's the way that we can shine as much light to as many people as possible.
Absolutely. We need that light to overcome the darkness, and our battle is not against flesh and blood, and the enemy does have his own answers available for people really, really easily to find. And so, if you're expecting to find an answer wherever you're looking, you will find an answer. And it may not be the right answer. So we have to be there to battle against that.
And I would say this too, like one thing to just think about, just kind of a little mind exercise, and this just popped into my head, is like, who's really good at marketing? Oftentimes the things of darkness are better at sharing their message than the kingdom people are. So like I'm thinking like beer companies, they're geniuses at marketing, and they get their message out to a lot more people than we. So I'm just like, man, I wish there was a day where God's people were just better at getting God's story out than anybody else on the face of the planet. What if we were better at communicating hope, life, help, God's message, God's good news than anybody else on the planet? That if somebody says, hey, how in the world do you get a message out? People would say, well, you need to go talk to local churches and pastors because they are so good at sharing their news with everybody. As opposed to, if you want to learn how to get a message out, go talk to the beer companies because they're really great at it. So anyway, that's the side that may not even make it into the final podcast, but just something that popped in my head.
Oh, that's gold. Yeah.
No, it's good. So we have established, a few things. We've established that our definition of what marketing is matters and can influence immediately whether or not we think about marketing as biblical or not biblical, just by getting a better definition. We've established that if we are really going to live out the Great Commission effectively, especially in today's day and age, we must have, we must do a better job with marketing, because the Great Commission is at the core of what we're supposed to be about. And we've kind of established a little bit of what's at stake. I love what you said, that we're going to continue to lose influence in the world if we don't get a handle on this. I kind of want to just pivot briefly before we wrap up, Ryan, on what's a good starting point. Because if you've been a pastor for 25 years and you've never really thought much about marketing, and maybe they're listening and they're convinced, we need to get better at that. It can be overwhelming to think YouTube, social media, Google, all this stuff. We know our website's a disaster or whatever. Where do we start? What do you tell to that pastor who's starting from scratch, or they know that they don't have great marketing?
Yeah. So this may on a couple of fronts seem very self-promoting, but let me give you a couple ideas. One is the Church Marketing Conference. What we're covering are the 7 essentials that churches have to get in place to move forward in the future and reach more people. And they're not really advanced stuff. It's really basic stuff, because at this point, we've worked with over 44,000 church leaders in our courses and our kits and our conferences. And when we first started our organization helping churches this, what we did is basically gave them this full buffet approach. And we had over 30 courses, and you could learn about Facebook ads and email and text message and website. And what we quickly found is all of that became very overwhelming, and churches got paralyzed, not knowing where to head. So what we've done is we've actually flipped it all to where we start churches with like the basic 7 things that they have to get in place, regardless of their church size, context. They're the 7 key things, and they sound really basic, but if you can get them in place at your church, they will help you tremendously be effective at reaching more people every single week.
Speaking of conferences, there's one coming up, September 20th through the 22nd. Is that correct?
Yep. Church Marketing Conference this year. We're really excited. I think we're going to have about 10,000 church leaders there. Really, the whole conference, what makes it unique is it is 100% focused on helping churches get more visitors. Again, that's our mission. That's what we do. So if a church is interested in, especially in this season that we're in, we're all trying to figure out this kind of craziness. And so if you want to go on that journey of like, man, let's figure it out. Let's do whatever it takes to get more people to hear the good news. Not only that, be discipled. That's what this conference is going to be focusing on. It's coming up September 20th, 21st, and 22nd. We're kicking off the conference with a worship experience. It's going to be a hybrid worship experience, somewhat if a bunch of church marketers created the church of the future without any limitations. What would that look like? What would that feel like? We're going to give churches the opportunity to come experience that with their team on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So really excited about that. It's going to be a ton of fun, maybe a train wreck, but you're going to want to be there to experience it. And see a little bit mystery shop what the church of the future could look like, feel like, and give you a chance, very low risk way to see some ideas in action and maybe take 1 or 2 ideas and go implement it at your church and help your church reach more people than ever before. So there's 7 things that are the basic things that we talk about that you just have to get right. Moving forward in the future, if you're going to reach as many people in your community as possible. We try to make them as simple as possible, non-intimidating as possible. And we try to get every church that we work with through those 7 things, because then after you complete that, anything else that you do becomes way more effective at a fraction of a cost. So if you're going to do some things like direct mail, you're going to do door hangers, you're going to do invite cards, you're going to do Facebook ads, all of those things become way more effective at a reduced rate, which for a lot of pastors listening, if you've ever tried something that another church had success with, you're like, man, they did that. We did the exact same thing and nobody showed up. Normally what we find is it's because you don't have your foundation in place. So we really start every church, get those basic things in place, get really good at those basic things. And then when you feel confident, start adding on maybe a little bit more advanced things.
And that's so good. And selfishly, Ryan, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on the podcast this week is because for folks who sign up for the CMU conference starting this week, there you get full access to Church Marketing University for a month. Now, not for a month from when you sign up, a month from September 7th to October 7th. Yep. So it kind of gives you an advantage if you sign up earlier so that you get to maximize your access for free to all that CMU has to offer. I love that you guys are making that available to folks at no cost for a month. That's such a great gift to churches, because even if a tiny church of 30 people or something, maybe they can't afford CMU long term, there's a lot they could learn in a month if they really wanted to. And what an amazing gift for churches. I really appreciate that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, we're trying the best we can to help as many churches as possible. I think when you experience the CMU community, hopefully you experience an over-the-top generosity at our conference. We're going to give you all the sessions. We're going to give you that month of Church Marketing University. We've developed a sermon series kit called A New Beginning that your church can go and use for January 2022. And in fact, the kickoff, that worship experience, is going to be modeling week 1 of that A New Beginning series. So our hope is if there's anything that you see at the conference and experience, we are just going to say, if you want to pull that off in your context, here's some resources, go and do it. And then certainly if that sounds awesome and you want to go on this adventure and you're like, man, I feel like these people could help me for years, we'd love to go on that adventure with you. For smaller churches, I know we mentioned Texton Church, but they've provided $10,000 worth of scholarships that we're going to be rolling out to try to get as many people in to CMU as possible. So for those churches who would say, hey, our top priority is reaching more people, I think you're going to love the conference, and then would love to talk with you about how we could help you maybe over the long haul.
That's awesome. So for our listeners, if you want to sign up for that conference, it's completely free and get that access to Church Marketing University from September 7th to October 7th, 2021. For those of you who are maybe listening to this in future years, you can go to malfirstgroup.com/CMU, and that's going to take you to the registration page there, and you can sign up for free and take advantage of all this stuff. What a great gift. I really hope that, we're at the Malfirst Group, we're nonprofit. We have a nonprofit heart. And so, I really hope that no one listening to this goes, wow, this was just one long commercial for a conference. If that's what you're taking away, you're missing the point. We wanted to have you on because there's a great resource that is free for you that you can access today. And we want you to take advantage of that. And if Ryan and his team provides value to you, then it's a good investment for your church, because it's going to create a kingdom harvest for your church if you're to get better at things that we talked about in this episode. And the stakes are high. Eternities are at stake. Before we hit record on this, Ryan, you kind of had a good analogy, and I don't know if you want to share that. It's a great way for us to wrap up this episode.
Yeah, more and more I've been thinking about this when a pastor asked me, should we really be marketing? Does Jesus need a marketing plan, type deal? And I get the perspective, but finally this analogy came to me, and I was like, man, I think this is helpful. And the analogy is this: is if you discovered a cure to a horrific disease, and you knew, man, this is the cure to this disease, and you did not use every tool available to get that cure out. Meaning somebody's like, hey, I know you've got the cure to that disease. Did you put that information on how people could learn about that on a website? Nope. Did you go tell people on Facebook, hey guys, I found the cure to this? Nope, didn't do it. Did you put it on YouTube? Did you put in a video that explained how you would come up with a cure and that disease could be? Nope, didn't do that. Did you do it? No, I've got the cure to the disease, but I didn't use every tool available. I think in my mind, I hear kind of that, man, what a wicked and lazy approach to an amazing gift that you had been given or that you discovered, and like, it's not going to go well for you. And so that's kind of what just sticks in my brain, is like, we have the cure to the hopelessness that our world faces, and we know where people can find hope in life. And if we aren't saying, God, what tool would you want our church to use to help? And that doesn't have to be every tool. That doesn't mean you have to do all of this, but just being like, God, is there a tool out there that you would want us to use to share the hope that you've given us and invite people to come experience the hope in our local context? Then I just think we have to be careful, that we just don't hide the light, right? Like we don't want to hide the light. So I would just keep coming back, man, let's use every tool possible to get that cure out there. God's given us that cure, and let's share that information with as many people as we possibly can.
Love it. I love it. Couple calls to action here as we wrap up. Again, as we've said, if you would like to register for free for the Church Marketing University Conference, go to malfirstgroup.com/CMU, and that will direct you to the registration page where you can get that set up for free. Ryan and his team graciously shared an article that they've written answering this question: is church marketing biblical? It goes even more in depth than we've been able to do on today's episode. So if you go to malfirstgroup.com/106, you'll be able to access that article there. And finally, if you're one of our YouTube viewers, there are team discussion questions down in the description below. So we encourage you to watch this episode with your team and ask these hard questions. Is church marketing biblical? Are we maximizing all of the tools at our disposal to share the good news about Jesus? Are we doing everything we can to get the news about the cure to folks in our community and in our world? So please check out those discussion questions in the description below. As always, we'd love for you to hit subscribe and never miss an episode, whether you're listening to an audio version of this or watching the video. Ryan, it's been such a joy and an honor, privilege to have you on with us today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Well, thanks for being with us this week on the Church Revitalization Podcast. We're praying for your church as always, and we'll be right back here with you next week.